whenever we have guests on, we never say bye.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Like we're just
Bye.
like, thank you so much. And then we stop the recording, then we keep talking to them for a little and then like say bye.
But we
And
don't
we just never
it.
record it.
Yeah.
So
We'll get better at it.
You know, you win some, you lose some.
How much better do you feel like you know me now?
A lot.
And you know what the truth is anything that I've ever said that has been remotely smart on here is because I learned it from.
Listen. Yeah. Yes, she guided you. And, you know, she was one of the many teachers and healers you've had in your life. But that's you, sister. That's you.
Thank you.
Tell them what just happened.
Everyone, you're in for a treat, baby. You're going to crack open into my brain a little bit more because we have on for you my first ever therapist, Miss Kim Egel, light of my life. She has been working in mental health for over 20 years. She's based in San Diego. She's been a marriage and family therapist for over 13 of those years. And I saw her since the age of 17 throughout, you know, a few years back now.
She got you in a rough spot.
I started in a rough spot going in with her and I came out self-actualized.
You're like, and now I am perfect.
Now I am perfect. I am your guru. Yeah. But Kim, the reason why I really wanted to bring Kim on is because she just helped teach me so many tools in terms of like the foundation in which I think we approach mental health in general on this show, which is very holistic, very inclusive, very mind, body, soul. I think she has such a, like, we're going to talk about like this universal overarching approach to it that just feels so safe for whatever perspective or biases, or I just think she has this kind of like uncanny ability to bridge everything together and make things make sense in whatever language or tools you use to describe it for yourself.
Yeah. I knew she was going to be great and wonderful because you preach about her, but then actually seeing her on and hearing the way that she was communicating everything, I was like, oh, we are so aligned. And like not in like a thank God you think like me way, but just in a way that I was like, fuck, you know,
right?
she's like, she'd be my therapist, you know? And so we talked about so many amazing things. We talked about truths, hearing your inner truths, over-intellectualizing things, which like Meadow and I are queens number 1 and number 2 of over here, to what to look for in a therapist, how to feel like if they're a good fit.
We talked about self-worth. We talked about building trust for yourself. We talked about working past blocks. Like we dove into everything here. And we dove into a lot. You had the same experience as Gabby and thought, wow, I feel really good. I feel really aligned. Like this is monumental. Kim's actually accepting clients right now. So you can go reach out to her. You're lucky. The link is in the description. You can reach out and say, Thoughts May Vary referred you, baby.
Well, we're going to leave all of her links. She also makes jewelry, Meadow mentioned.
No, she's the most multifaceted queen I've ever met in my life.
She's cool as fuck.
She's cool as fuck. So we're going to leave all her links below. I'm so excited for you to meet Kim. We also are absolutely going to be bringing Kim back on our Patreon. We're going to have her on for a newsletter. We'll answer your direct questions. If you came up with questions during this, send them to us. Kim's going to come back and answer them directly. She's going to be a friendly face around Thoughts May Vary. Okay?
She is. We're really excited about it. I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as we did.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
All right. Let's just get straight to the insights, baby.
We have nothing more important to say.
Here's Kimbo.
The beginning is usually just Mahal screaming at us for a little bit.
Kim's already had that experience before. It might happen again today. The dog. Yeah, she's literally right below me just eyeing me. So in case she starts yelling, but I'll just go on mute.
The listeners know.
It's all good.
They're aware.
Okay, listeners. You have my pride and joy. My therapist herself, Kim Egel. Here today.
Here I am.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation for sure.
I'm so excited.
I have been so excited to meet you. I mean, from the moment that Meadow and I became friends, like I've heard your name and I've heard the lessons, and I just finally am putting a face to all the lessons and the name and all the stories. And so we're very grateful that you're taking the time to talk to us. And
absolutely.
I'm so excited for the listeners. I mean, I'm excited to see where this conversation goes, but I'm just excited for our listeners too.
Yeah. And you know what is funny, even to start with that, because obviously this is you guys, there's client therapist relationship. I used to be your therapist, which you stated, and there's that funky gray area about that, right? And just to kind of be clear, it's been like a certain amount of time that needs to pass before you can do certain things. But even so, I think this day and age, just you being upfront about it. I'm not the one, you're not on my podcast where I'm bringing on my client without consent. So it's just like, I don't know. I feel like all that stuff needs to be clarified, because some people are gonna be like, wait, what?
And also, like, you've been on Mad Happy's blog. You came when I was trying to do YouTube and was on a YouTube channel. Like, you've been so generous with helping me and
Sure.
whatever like advocacy space I've wanted to be in over the years too.
Sure.
Like this has been an ongoing bridge of our
Sure.
relationship and
And
it's
it's evolved.
transitioned.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
When did you guys meet? Tell the people. I mean, I know, but tell the
Oh,
people.
I was 17.
Baby Meadow.
You were in that old space by Torrey Pines Beach.
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Our first session
Yeah.
ever was in that old space by Torrey
Okay.
Pines Beach. My whole life was in crumbles. And I went to Kim and I came out with a very, very different lessons that I thought I was going to get going in. And it made all the difference in the world.
Very cool.
But that's part of my questions later. So I don't want to get too into my details about it now.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'll lead us in. So can we start every episode by asking our guests what they're currently unpacking? It ranges in variety. We have some people that just give us quick jokes.
Okay.
Some people love to go deep. It's whatever our guest feels comfortable
even when
sharing.
you said that, it's I'm going deep because it came right to me, right? That question, exactly. I think whatever comes right to you. I think right now I'm really challenging myself on, it's like practicing what you preach in the sense where there's things that I know that there's like blocks around that I'm not going toward. And I know because I'm not going toward them, there's a quality of life that I'm like capped at. And it's going to require just get out of your comfort zone, like get out of it. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting just with like work that you do on yourself, how that gets just painfully obvious, with awareness of like what exactly actually it is and what the things are that if you just go toward them, things will start unfolding for you. So I guess in terms of unpacking, I'm just like really trying to more intentionally push myself to do those just like callings, I guess you want to kind of call them, right? Just those things that you're just like, I know that are like going on in your head.
Are those coming up for you in like a professional life capacity and like fun, random personal things or in all of it?
I think it's kind of it feels all intertwined at this point. I think especially with like officially really doing this job more virtually and remotely where that opens up just more possibilities. And also too, personally, looking at more fun, creative ways to do this job, like being on podcasts more than just like being super clinical, just in the office, only seeing clients. It's just, I have a lot of ideas that are just like firing right now. And I think that part of personal stuff and pushing myself in those ways is going to correlate into the business stuff too. It's just, it's like a vision that I can't even I can't even explain it, but it's there. And so,
now that we're having this conversation, I'm like realizing I've never spoken to a therapist about what they're going through.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because it's like normally in a different sort of setting, or even if it's in an interview setting, the therapist that I have interviewed, whether it's for stories that I'm writing or on, things like this, it's always in a capacity of like what they can like bring to us. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
It's like a cool thing that we do here on the podcast is like open the space up. Do you find that it's difficult to allow yourself time to go deep because you're like constantly holding space for others as part of your work?
No, I mean, I think that that's like what you have to do for yourself in order to stay, balanced and like sane and healthy, right? Like you still have to totally do you in order to like do all the helping or support or whatever you're doing in your craft for your clients. Like it's like, if I totally deplete myself, how am I going to perform? It's like an athlete, right? So I think even more so this job, it's like, that's my responsibility to keep my mental, like physical, and then this is the way I'm doing it, right? I'm not saying this is like the standard for the profession, but I think personally for me, I do feel somewhat of a responsibility to like be on my freaking A game.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's so funny hearing you say that because I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's why I chose this field in general, because all I want is the excuse to have all the time in the world to focus on my own personal development. And that's directly a job where you're required. It's like, oh, I gave myself permission because I'm in the job where it's required to do that. That's so funny.
Yeah. Well, it's also the job where so many people burn out, because you're overloaded with everybody else's stuff. So it's an interesting, I think I've been really mindful of that just through the years of doing this, because at this point it's like 20 years, right?
Wow.
And so at this point I'm
drop the skincare routine.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm pretty clear about what to not like. I'm so protective of that space. because I've seen burnout and I'm not interested. Like,
Yeah.
Thank you. No, thank
No,
you.
we're good. We're good on that. We're good on that.
good.
Okay. Let's jump into your work because I already off the bat have a question. So I want you to kind of cue up how everything you do is centered around truth and speak to that a little bit. But I had an opening question to get you started about that in general. So Kim's practice, as she'll elaborate, is mostly about helping her clients find their truth. I'm wondering if you approach that as there's one fundamental truth that every unique person is meant to be their authentic self, not that I'm projecting my own beliefs here, or if you have to work with each person's belief system to find what truth means to them every time.
It kind of almost feels like it's like one and the same of what you're saying, right? Like
So,
sub-truth
yeah.
to everybody, it's like it is really listening to somebody. And I think like it sounds kind of like, even when I hear the back, it's like my goal is, to help my clients hear the truth. Like it sounds so cheesy, but like it's true.
It sounds lofty, but
It's
it is,
true,
yeah.
Because I think what it is no matter who's in front of me, you're hearing somebody's blocks, whether it's around money, whether it's around like they don't feel worthy of like love, good career, good, whatever it is, it's blocks. And it's kind of blocks to their best self, right? Like that's the whole point. And people are coming to me with whatever issue is on the table, and it's something that's hindering their ability to live the life that they want because they're feeling unhappiness, depression, or they're feeling some side effect, the consequence of the block. And so I guess it's in my head to like kind of break it down with each person. It's like, okay, every person has their individual truth that's uniquely theirs. And it's my job to listen for it and to hear what kind of lights them up, what makes them happy, what they want. And it's also to listen for the blockage. Literally, it's like even if you're going in there as a surgeon and kind of looking where it's blocked. And if you really like, I kind of just see it like that. And when you start kind of helping people toward their truth or what they really want for themselves or their goals or their desires or whatever, there's all these like words, right? And they all kind of point to the same thing. That's when someone gets healthier. If that makes any sense.
That does make sense. There was one question that came up for me when you were speaking. And so we've spoken about it, particularly in the beginning of the podcast. We always say, not everybody has a mental illness, but everybody has mental health. And when you were speaking, something that came up for me, I was like, I wonder what the difference is, right? Because you were explaining these things as like symptoms of the blockage, right? Like, I wonder if you can elaborate on the difference. If someone comes in that's like diagnosed with clinical depression, and then there's someone who's like going through a bout of depression. So if it's someone, right, that like has been diagnosed with something, like what is a way to sort of work through those blockages? Because like in my negative brain, I immediately go to like, are they ever going to be able to work through blockages? Because like chemically there's something going on.
Loaded question.
I know.
I think when you get into like chemically, that's where it kind of shifted for me because and then I think there's, specific clinicians and therapists and professionals you're going to go to if you're really wanting the like chemical piece, which is more medical. And this is all speaking how I see it. For me, I feel like it comes down to like, we all have relationships with everything, right? We have a relationship with money. We have a relationship with anxiety and control and fear. We have relationships with all these things. And how healthy our relationship is with all of these different aspects of our life contribute to like what depression would look like for us or, all these other things. So also too, like depression and the label, it's for the clinician to help the client, right? So it's like this kind of gets sticky in terms of like diagnosis. And, I see some clients that totally want the diagnosis so they don't have to do anything about it. And they can go, yeah, see, I have this. Like, so, nothing I can do because it's chemical. And, I'm kind of like hands are tied. But at the same time, they don't go and do it just gets so slippery, right? Is it the chicken or the egg? Like, do you get to the point where you're so depressed that you can't get out of the house? But where did that start? And at what point, so it gets into kind of this like real big knot. It almost feels like that you like, if you can catch it earlier, I guess it would be easier to untangle, but it's tricky when you get to the point where it's like, it's a chemical thing. I don't get out of the house. My career's in the crap. My relationships are all gone, but it's like that took time to get that complicated, just as like a knot would take a lot of time to get complicated. So And I think for me, we're talking like clinical depression where you're like knocking out of bed, not functioning. That is way beyond private practice therapists. We're talking residential treatment centers, stuff like that, where there's staff and, onboard networks to help a client collectively. I don't know. I kind of went around that question.
Well, it's also just like a sticky question in general, because so many therapists
Right.
nowadays like don't like the DSM and there's problems with it. And it has like racist and transphobic history. Like, it leads into bigger issues too, I feel like.
Well, and also too, every question you guys ask, I'm speaking to how I do this. And there's such like, do this work, right? And I'm not heavy in the real, clinical environment, hospital, medication prescribed. Like that's not so much what I'm doing in terms of my practice. So it's almost like you're going to get a really different answer from someone that's more working in that kind of a scope.
Okay, well then let's get more into your practice, because that's where your magic is for me. Okay, because one of the things I wanted to start this with you in the same way that we started my therapy. I was, having all this family turmoil around me, and I went to the one friend that I knew was seeing a therapist, and it was Kim. And I started seeing Kim, and I went in like, hey, I have all this trauma I'm going through right now. My dad died, my brother died, my younger brother was sent away. And the first 2 years, I literally learned boundaries. And it felt like I was going in like, oh, I have grief, I have this family issue. And I feel like within 2 years, we turned around every single friendship I had, which is never something I would have said that I was looking for or needed going in. But it's the first thing and first tool and skill I came out with, which I think is really cool and also indicative of what you're saying in terms of guiding people to find their truth and what that really looks like and how that can bring up exactly opposite of what you expected, or if there's two truths at once, or if you maybe,
we
a
were
truth
just
gets
talking about
unearthed.
this.
Gabby and I, in prepping for your call, we were just talking about like, what happens if
I was like, what if there's multiple
what
truths?
What happens if we over-intellectualize our truth? Like, I want you
it's
to
Meadows and I, our favorite. No, our favorite thing to do.
You guys are great.
Already on a rabbit hole.
Totally know.
Like Meadow,
the duo.
It's like, I'm so grateful for her and her friendship, but it's sometimes you and I, Meadow, we get into these because we both rabbit hole.
And we both are Alice. We're just diving straight down. You know what I mean?
Those are great conversations that people are going to be able to listen to. Oh, wow.
We over-intellectualize way too much. So I was like, can't wait to talk about it with Kim.
I almost think that, like, for simplicity, when you say, is there two truths? It's like, to me, again, truth's like the rainbow. It's like truth. And then there's like everything that's underneath it. Right?
I love that.
I mean, it's not necessarily like none of this is like, hey, this is right. But it's like, to me, it's like just someone's truth. It's just like simple.
Wow.
Does that mean that when people are coming to you for that they always accept that right away? Or do you find that it's a process to get to them to what that truth is like to experience? Or do you find that when you introduce that concept to clients that it feels so good to be aligned with your truth that it kind of happens more naturally?
Yeah. So it's not necessarily like I like lead with that. Like you were just kind of like talking about like, hey, this is like, because I've shared with you that that's my almost philosophy, but it's not something I like lead with. Like, okay, like you're a new client, like we're here to find your truth.
Here's your truth.
Yeah, right. It more comes out. I like to do it more. Just someone comes in and I just start listening. Like I did, like you point out, it was like the more I'm listening to you and I'm listening about your relationships. Oh, well, hold on a second. You don't have boundaries. And I'm listening to this. Or
don't laugh, Gabby. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. So it's more of listening to where their block is, which a lot of times they don't even understand why they're feeling a certain way or why they're getting certain results in their life. Right. They're at a point where there's like, some people are just like, I don't get it. I don't get why this is happening. But in terms of what I do, I feel like my job, I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for things that are consistent. I'm looking for, ways that they're answering questions or even ways that they're acting with me that it's like they could be playing out in their own life that's causing their own issues for themselves.
Wow.
My brain is spinning. Go ahead, Meadow.
I was just going to say, did you have to come to your own truth on your own realization in order to give it to others? How much of the, I guess, like tools or resources that you went through to get there impact how you serve others, or does it become entirely different and show you the range of the rainbow of truth?
I mean, this is where everybody's different, right? And everyone's doing this job a different way. And I think it's taken years to kind of more even like own the fact of like, this is all me. This is my business. This is how I'm doing it. Right. And I think the more and more I've done that, the more and more you really speak to who's a good fit for you. And those people kind of come more your way. But there was definitely a point in this career where it was not like my practice, and what it is today wasn't the reality of what it was. And there's school, there's what you learn, there's who you are. I mean, for everybody, for every therapist, there's who they are naturally, what their experience is. I think it's more about making sure that there's not, and that's what school does, and the internships and the supervision. It's all making sure that we all have our stuff, right? It's not that like, I'm done. I'm done with my self-growth, right? Like that's not the case, but it's looking at what you have been through, making sure that your stuff is at a point where it's not going to get in the way of your work for other people. And if it does, you know the warning signs, and you know what you need to do for yourself to take a step back so your crap doesn't get on your clients.
Right, right. When we're talking about like over-intellectualizing and going back to the concept that Meadow and I were laughing about of like having so many truths, what would be a piece of advice that you would give to almost I call them the like self-aware cynicals, where like you're so, and I get that way sometimes.
Yeah.
And I have friends in my life that are like that like, they've done, it's not even they haven't done the work. It's like they've been smacked in the face with things and they just are hyper intellectuals and are able to get to that level of self-awareness very quickly. But then they're like, great, I'm self-aware. What the fuck does that do for me? Like, great, I know it, haha. And then it's this like cynical like roller coaster.
Right. So it's like, I think anyone that's like, though, really like self-aware, you're not going to get to a point where you think you know it all, right? Like, it's like anyone really evolved is not going to ever think that they're like really evolved. Like almost,
or done.
Or done, or that like, that's it, they did it. Right. And not to speak to, I'm just saying, but who is that? Like no human being has like finished. Right. And I think sometimes what I hear you speaking to, or maybe I think, it's like, I think there is the really good quality is often what can really bite you in the butt. And I think people who are really intellectual and overanalyze and like to like get into deep conversations, sometimes that's the very thing that really trips you up in life, because it does cause you to ping pong. And there's a really fine balance between being analytical and being really intellectual, and not ruminating and analyzing and picking things apart and going into existential crisis and like what's wrong and right. And like, I think that there's a balance point where it can become something that can swallow you alive. And it's also something that's like so amazing. It's like so creative and all these good things, but each person that has that mind, sometimes those are my clients that are the most tortured, right? It's like the tortured artist. Like there's just so much going on up there that even more so you need to figure out what you need to do for yourself. So there's a place for it to land without you just kind of going bonkers. And you hear that in history. Like look at all these great, smart people. It's like sometimes they're the most just like you got to get your head in check. That's $1 million question. How do you do that?
Well, I was going to say to someone like Gabby and I, who obviously can relate to that experience so much.
And me too. I'm with you girls. Sure. Why am I a therapist, right? Yeah.
And I just can imagine someone listening to this, hearing this and thinking, okay, I feel that so much and that sounds like me, but I've never experienced what that balance and line feels like. So how do I know when I'm getting close? Like, what would you say to someone that's never even, they're like, how am I supposed to know what's safe and what's balanced if I've never felt safe and I've never experienced that?
Yeah.
Well, even when you say never, it's like, it's even like when people come in with anxiety, it's like, when was the last time, like, when were you not anxious? Even you have to go back to when you were like 4 years old sitting on like grandma's lap. Like, so I think that like the truth is that they're, just based on being a human, there probably was a time where it was more in balance to some degree. And I also think that's what the kind of the chronic work is. It's like, you have to always eat well to stay healthy. You have to always do these things to stay balanced, right? So it's figuring out, and it can change, right? So I think it's what you could start doing is just, there's all these baseline things like eating, sleeping, exercise, your social relationships. Like those are all things you can do some inventory on and just work on trying to get some balance within that, because if you don't even know where to start, that's where I would point you toward.
Back to
Because
the basics.
it is that it's like, I always find myself saying this on podcasts. It's like, it sounds so boring. I wish I had something more interesting to say, but
but it's the truth.
Like if you're struggling with, so-and-so, but you sleep 4 hours a night and you eat like crap and you drink a lot and you have crappy friendships, like, how much can I help you here? This is like, now my hands are tied. And I get that to some clients, and I'll say that. I'll be like, my hands are a little tied because now we don't really know if it's like, what's going on here, because I know how I feel when I, don't sleep good or feel exhausted or right. So we have to see where your baseline is at in order to know where we're going to go from there, for sure.
I know that you say that being like, oh, I wish I had something more interesting to say, but I think, and I feel like Meadow would agree with me, correct me if I'm wrong, but because it is such the basics, I feel like that's the stuff that's just accessible. And we talk about that a lot, is like accessibility and not everyone having access to their own personal therapist. And like, those are the basic things, right? That are like feeding into everything.
100%.
But I guess for, the person that maybe they're the person that doesn't have access or doesn't have, let's say, like the quote unquote time to figure out that balance, like what is a step that they could take to do that? Where like, if they're taking care of others or, they don't have certain resources.
Yeah. I think even like not having the time to be healthy for yourself is a problem.
Yeah.
So that's like, if when the client comes to me and it's just like, well, I just don't have time. It's like, okay, well, let's go into like how much you're like giving to everyone and not yourself. Let's look into like, let's just like look at what we could potentially just kind of cut out. It's like anything. It's if you don't have 5 minutes to like, or if you can't sleep, a good amount of hours a night, like what is going on? Like, I'm interested in what kind of lifestyle you have created that's not allowing you to do anything healthy, have zero time for yourself.
And the deeper reasoning beyond that. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. The guilt and
everything. And then that's where it just starts all unfolding, right?
Yeah.
It's just like through these basic things, or these like little comments. It's like, oftentimes I'll be like, wait, stop. You're like going too fast. Like, what did you just say? Like, cause sometimes people just are like, it's like, they want to fill you in. They want to hurry up. They want to like fix me. I have to get to the stuff. And it's very often it's stopping you. And I notice sometimes that if you can get like irritated, you're like, oh my God, why is she stopping on something that's like benign? And it's like, cause it's not benign.
Yeah.
If you let me dig a little bit. To me. Yeah, if you let me dig a little bit. And also too, when it's our stuff, like sometimes even unconsciously, we don't want to go to certain areas. We don't even realize it. We're just like, let's not talk about that. And so it's just, I get why people don't want to put themselves in a therapeutic environment. I mean, at least with like, I think everyone's different, but I definitely am there to help you. And I am going to kind of sniff around in the best, most well-intended way, because I am not the clinician that's going to be in the room and just do a lot of like, right, like I'm going to kind of start really trying to get somewhere with you. And again, it's art. And when you go too much and you feel someone kind of like creeping back, I'm not going to. But I think it's an art. I think this job is an art, and you got to like really know your room and all there's so much stuff going on in a session.
Yeah.
It's cool.
I mean, it's such a dance that you all do.
It's such a dance. Yeah. I want to get into that a little bit because Gabby, not to put you on the spot, but Gabby is just having this experience where, she saw a therapist a couple of years ago and now is just starting with a new one and is kind of figuring out if it's her vibe and what she's looking for.
Yeah, cool.
And I think when you're talking about like, noticing these things that may seem benign to you, but they're not to me, how can people who are, starting therapy for the first time or finding a new one differentiate between this is a modality or style or perspective that isn't aligned with me and maybe won't serve me versus, they're pushing me and I'm thinking it's benign, but this is actually leading me somewhere that I need to go. And this is pushing my healing in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own.
I don't think it's almost like dating a person. Like sometimes you're not going to know until you keep going. It's actually like, honestly, I almost want to say that with like a therapist. I think you are kind of dating your therapist. in terms of like, at first, you might not know that until you keep kind of going toward it. One thing I do think you are going to know if it feels really like bad and intrusive. And if it feels a certain way that's like, ugh, like I don't like how I felt in the room with that person. I don't feel like if there's something else going on. Right. But I think that sometimes if you're with someone that's, you feel safe and you like their approach, but you're noticing like it's just there's blockage around, certain topics that are coming up. I think I don't know. I think part of it is feeling resistant and part of it is feeling kind of uncomfortable for sure. But I think this is where this might take some time for each person to sort out. When is the discomfort like because it's not right? And when is the discomfort just because it's like uncomfortable? And that's in so many different areas of life.
Totally.
Yeah. How many sessions would you say? Is there like a baseline for you?
Gabby's like, I'm in the middle of figuring this out.
Yeah. No,
like what's my ultimatum?
Yeah. Like, no, because that's what happened with my last therapist. We're like, I'm going into tomorrow will be my second session with this new therapist. And thank you. And I'm really happy so far. But I was telling Meadow earlier, like I've been doing acupuncture recently with a woman who it's all mind, body, spirit stuff. And so she's basically been like a therapist to me and has really helped me in a way that
it'd be so
most
up your alley,
people
Kim.
like frankly can't. Like, and I don't know. And I don't mean that in like a pretentious way. I just think that like I'm very good at dancing around topics and I'm very good at like avoiding things. Like I speak for a living and I write for a living. Like I'm good at it. And this acupuncturist has done a remarkable job of seeing through my bullshit in 0.5 seconds and calling me out on it in a way that is like direct, but like out of a place of genuine care. And like, it feels like a friend that like really like loves you.
Yeah.
And so I was telling Matto before I got on the call, I was like, yeah, I just wonder like, do I need to be paying for both these people? Like what's going on? And because my last therapist, it was that where it was like, I was getting more out of writing in my journal, but we have a lot of people writing in being like, how many sessions like do I go to? Like how many times do I give them a chance? How many dates do I go on with this person?
People want the black and white number. They're like 6 sessions and then you're, people want
I think if that doesn't start to fit, if you're so focused on like, wait, do I need to go on another one? Like if you keep asking, because eventually I think it should, like even if it's uncomfortable, it's something that you like feel like you're growing. You do start to like, I think you should start feeling something that like something's happening that's good, right? So it's not a number of sessions, but I would say if you're going for, 3 months, 2 months, and you're just like, I feel nothing. Like I would, any doctor, any healer, if you're taking a Spanish course and you're like, I've learned nothing. Like, at what point do you just start questioning if it's the right lane for you? And with you, Gabby, it's kind of cool because what you've proved to yourself is that it is possible for you to go to a healer or, like someone in this wellness profession and feel like, whoa, like boom, off the bat. And I think that it could be, it's like a synergy of like where you're at personally and how she approached you. And like, there's so much going on that kind of makes it to be that with another person. That's why it's like unique to find a partnership that's like, oh my gosh, right? I think it's the same with this kind of relationship. But with you, like to answer your question, like just, it's learning how for you to not doubt yourself. Because it sounds like if you keep going to this therapist and you feel like you're just getting more out of your journal for the next, 3 months, and you feel like you go to this acupuncturist and you're just like getting your mind blown. I mean, I don't know. There's no right answer.
Right.
There is none.
You said something in there that stood out to me about like trusting yourself. And that's like a conversation that we have a lot. And I see that a lot that was like one of my biggest pain points 3 years back that I really worked through. And that's, Meadow, let me know if you feel the same way of like, sometimes the questions that we get that people write into us, Meadow and I are like, babes, I don't know how to answer that because that is such a personal choice. That's such a personal question. I feel like we see that a lot now with like social media of like everyone becoming each other's like big sister, big brother, that it's this like, people are like losing the art of like learning how to think for themselves and like trusting. Well,
instead
their
of
own
asking,
gut.
they think they're asking for advice, but they're asking for a decision to be made for them.
Yes.
which is what advice is, which is also not what therapy is.
Which is, by the way, a shock that people have when they go to therapy and their therapist doesn't tell them how to fix everything.
I know. That's such a, it's, I really
It was
feel like
my shock.
Yeah. The shock being that, like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to help you discover what you should do. Right. It is crazy how many people really just are like frustrated with that and want to know what you should not to do. I think that part of the work, right, and part of like what's your truth is learning how to trust yourself, because how are you going to find your truth if you don't trust your decisions to get there? Right. And so I think that it is part of what the journey is learning how to prove to yourself that, I think, your own accountability with yourself. Like, how like if you're in a relationship with someone and what they say and what they do completely doesn't align. I think it's the same. You're building that trust with yourself. Like, you have a relationship with yourself, and based on how much you believe that you follow through with yourself and what your word is for yourself, and if you say one thing and you do another, all that stuff can compromise your own belief in yourself. And when that starts kind of getting chipped away at, I think you do start looking outwardly and externally for your answers. And when you get in a habit of doing that, and when you have people in your life that really want to tell you what to do, that muscle of you making decisions for yourself, it absolutely weakens. It's like working out. You have to keep it. You have to keep practicing it. So it's like all of these things. It's like anything. It's funny because it's like working out. You don't stop for a month and think you're going to be in shape. Like, it's a constant, and it's the same with mental health stuff. And it doesn't mean you need to grind and like read all. It can be just like you have really interesting conversations with people, or you dig deep in like philosophy, like whatever. Like, you read books, you watch cool like movies that even have whatever. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. It's just challenging yourself to be real with what's going on with you, and trying to like practice like expression, and trying to notice when, if you have issues around conflict, to try to like go toward it a little bit. It's just, it's kind of knowing your blocks, knowing where the flashlight is within you uniquely, and challenging it to some degree because it's uncomfortable. So it's like you have to kind of almost, I feel like, to be really living a good life, you have to get used to being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to get used to it to some
degree.
God,
the amount of times I've heard you say that to me.
I know, and it sucks. It sucks.
Like, it just like sent me flashbacks. Yeah. It's
but
true.
The more you do it, the more it's not uncomfortable. Exactly. But that when you take a big step back from it, it gets really hard to put yourself back in the cold water.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Are self-trust and self-worth two sides of the same coin? Because in the way you were describing that and answering that question for Gabby, it really feels like they're very similar to me.
Self-trust and
like self-worth. Like the amount that you trust yourself being equated with the amount of like respect and worth you hold for yourself.
I think it's all spiderwebbed. Like all of it, right? It's like mind-body connection. Like,
let's get into that, because
that's a
you are great at that, and you even do walk and talk sessions. I want to talk about that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Please continue.
Yeah, I just think it's all spiderweb. Like, that's like the simple I can answer that. I don't think there's any compartmentalized, like, who has zero self-esteem and is like, even if you're killing it in a certain area, you're doing a lot of things to mask that, part of yourself that is demanding a lot of attention, that you're putting on a lot of faces to mask that. And eventually it's going to catch up with you, or it's going to be seen through, or, it's just, you can't sustain that.
Yeah.
The way that just penetrates my soul. Because it's like exactly everything I'm working through is like the facade, the faces, the projections.
How cool though. But I mean, even like for you to like own that and say it and be at a point now where you're like totally like, oh, that's what I'm, to everybody.
I don't think I've ever actually even said that like that on the pod. It makes me itchy.
Let's go. Good job.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about emotions being stored in our body and mind-body connection, and why it's so helpful, and why you place such a huge emphasis on it in your practice.
I mean, where to even start with that? Maybe it even starts with my own journey with my own physicality.
Ooh, please.
And like things that I've gone through that have been really difficult, and how physicality, athletics, just my physical body has spoken to me, and also like how it's helped. Also just seeing clients and seeing just really trippy things, like, you know, when people struggle with having a voice, watching how like their speech is really like compromised or quiet, or just, you know, anxious. A lot of anxiety, is a lot of stomach issues, a lot of you know, just it's just so interesting, especially with being in this seat, to just, you're watching life. You know, you have all these people in front of you, and you're just hearing their stories, and you're watching how things are manifesting in their body based on their symptoms. And it's so interesting how there's commonalities that keep matching up from my scope of doing it for 20 years. So it's like, there has to be something here. Then there's all the literature on it that, you know, the body keeps a score, or that book. And there's all this now literature and educational reads that like really speak to it. And I'm just like, that was like so exciting for me when all that stuff started coming out about it. Because I think first and foremost, though, it was my own experience in my own physical body with my own self, of how emotions were coming up for me, or how I use my physicality to push them through, or that
it's
makes
so
any
cool
sense.
to hear. No, it makes so much sense. And it's so cool to hear you say that, because to me, that's you getting excited about, you know, empirical research validating your own intuition. And the reason
Right.
why I think I have a strong intuition is because how much work you and I did on that. And like, like even just hearing you say the word manifesting, you were the one that ever introduced The Secret, or that concept, to me in general. And like 2000, God, I don't even know, like 14, 12, I don't, 10,
Yeah.
something forever ago. But so I'm wondering, because I haven't even spoken to you about it in a while, how is your approach to manifestation changed?
What do you mean? Like from what to?
I don't know, like how, I mean,
Well,
when you and I were first talking about it, even The Secret was still kind of big. Like
yeah,
that whole
yeah.
rhetoric, the law of attraction stuff was still really
Uh-huh.
big. I'm just wondering over the years, like how your
Yeah,
own
cool.
development of your intuition, like what does it look like now?
I got you. I got you. I think it's tricky because that word now is like very trend, you know,
Oh,
Oh,
or
it's
or
such a
or
buzzword.
or actually past the trend, and now it's like, oh my gosh, here she goes
Yep.
manifesting, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I could put it down to, I don't know how familiar you guys are with like Dr. Joe Dispenza, but it was
Yeah.
just, he does a lot, right? It's like
Uh-huh.
neuroscience stuff and like
Uh-huh.
quantum physics stuff, like
Yep.
even like Wayne Dyer stuff on that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that also speaks to manifesting. And those are the old, you know, like a Wayne
Mm-hmm.
Dyer is like an old school teacher of someone teaching that concept. So it's been around for a really long time. It wasn't, The Secret made it what it is, but like, it's tricky because I think that word just gets
As
lost in
every
some
mental health, I
context,
mean,
but
Yeah.
the word trigger had that happen to it,
absolutely.
manifesting, like all of
I
these psych
know.
terms are just being hijacked and losing all
Totally.
their actual meaning. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's actually funny that you asked that question, because I literally just listened to a podcast this morning, and it's just on the power of like, your thoughts really do dictate, like it's
Your reality.
manifestation is just the word that we've put on the whole system that helps people, you know, create what they desire, what they want to come into their life. And
Yeah.
again, I'm like listening to myself say all this, and I'm like, oh no, the language, you know, but it's like, I don't know. You know, it's not for me to put my way that I see my perspectives and my philosophy, but it's for people to come toward me that are aligned with it. But that's why, you know, everybody's different, but that's how I see it. And how I see, you know, someone live their life, and then they start taking chances. And when they start taking chances, get out of their comfort zone, life starts happening. And then they meet so-and-so, and then they don't have to be stressed. And it's crazy. I watch it happen. Like, I watch one person at a time that gets enough courage and bravery to go do something different. They go do something different. That gets momentum. Momentum then makes them get like more courageous. So they start doing more different things. And then all of a sudden they're living in Italy, and they met their husband, and they have 2.5 kids. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, but people, it's hard because when you're stuck, it's like you can get stuck in the frustration of like, how the F do I get there? And I have no clue how to get there. So I'm just going to stay here because it's too uncomfortable to like even think about it. And I don't want to think about it. So I'm not going to think about
Yeah.
it.
My acupuncturist said something. I just had a session this morning, and
Cool.
I wish I had the exact verbiage that she used, but I was explaining to her about how there's an exciting potential opportunity in my career. And it basically was just like, leading back to something that I thought I would always do and then kind of like put aside for a minute. And now it's like in my brain again. And I was just saying in my head, I was like, it's cool that I was able to just like have that conversation with my mom. And then like, you know, a couple weeks later, like this is sort of coming to fruition. And instead of saying like manifesting, she said, oh God, what is it that she said? But it was essentially like you're laying those like bricks in your brain. There was like a phrase that she
like
used.
A breadcrumbs, follow the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, like similar. Yeah, of like following the breadcrumbs and how it sort of just starts to like you said, it like creates the possibility in your brain and like something activated in me that was like the validation of like, no, you can do that. And like, you're capable of doing that. And not only are you capable of like, you will probably. So like, it's like, then my way of thinking shifts. And I feel like when you say it in those terms, it's exactly what you're saying. Cause I feel like the word manifestation has like lost its beauty because it's just been clouded with the like woo woo. Oh, you're just some like crystal girl who like,
for sure.
You know, is like,
and I'm that too.
Me too. I'm like, and I am.
And I'm that too.
we all are.
I'm like, you know, I'm charging my crystals under the moonlight. Like, don't worry. Don't worry. But yeah, it's lost it's interesting when we introduce new vocabulary to help people get, and then it's funny when you see these like, again, like these like cynical people that like get to something on their own and you're like, yeah, no shit. We're just calling it two different things. We're talking about the same concept.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, it's,
Yeah.
And
Language
also it
is
sounds
limiting.
like flow, right? Like that concept of flow. And I do, like, there's a part of me that's playing around with that with even my own personal self is like, oh, okay, that was like 3 times I heard that guy, like that name of that, the word someone named Tony in 24 hours came into my life in the weirdest ways. Oh, whoa, that came into my, like, I'm really paying attention to like flow. And I don't know, it's just kind of fun. I think you can start with just playing around with it for yourself because someone can preach it all day long, but it's not until you really start seeing patterns within your own life and start seeing that energy kind of work for you that you're going to believe it.
100%.
You know, it's so cool too. As both of you were speaking, I was in my head, I'm like, and it all, you know what it all comes back to? Truth and trust.
I'm always
like, that's what it literally all comes back. I'm like just saying, you're like, it is the spider web.
The truth
rainbow. Like, it really, it all just comes, it is all fucking spider webbed.
Yeah.
It's all like the same kind of similar concepts that all just feed, like the more that you, Gabby, I don't know if what you're speaking about is the same thing that you've shared on the podcast before, where you wanted to do something in your career and it took Amy Astley turning to you to be like, yeah, bitch, of course you should do that, for you to be like, oh, I can. Like, it's just when you give yourself permission to have trust in what your gut intuition is and watching that unfold with like the patterns that are put in front of you and the lessons that it's absolute magic, which is why we call it manifesting and why it feels woo-woo, because it's magic, but it's not. It's also just like we are creating our realities.
Yeah.
It's also like awareness, right? I think when you start getting more aware, you get more aware of those moments. Like I literally, even for my own life, I know the key moments where someone said the most benign thing. It kind of sounds like what happened to you, Gabby. Like it was the most benign thing in the most weird moment of like, you know, like that it meant nothing and it changed everything. Right. And so it's like, there's something just interesting about when you start paying more attention to what someone said that kind of like made you feel a certain way. It's so easy to be like, anyways, whatever, no big deal. But like, I don't know, like it's cool to just start paying more attention.
And that also, I feel like, maybe this is tangential, but I also feel like that helps people work through triggers, because you start to realize that if someone says something that means nothing, but sounds like nothing, but meant everything, that's because of where you're at in your life and how it reached you, and not because of the words they used. So it starts to help like shift focus away from like, oh, I'm triggered by this, I'm going to avoid it, to, whoa, I'm triggered by that. What is it? Like, let me go deeper.
100%.
Like, what's behind that?
I think like when anything kind of like makes you feel anything other than your baseline, that's interesting. Like that's something to pay attention to, whether it's, hey, you're dating somebody and you should like pay attention to the red flag, or, you know, something is making you feel something emotionally, to just in a good way, where it's like, that's a friendship to hold on to. Like they're like making you up level, right? Like I just think it's cool when you start really being intentional about that kind of stuff in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. We talk a lot about signs, huh, Meadow?
Oh God, too much. Yeah. I have a total sidebar random question that just came to me. But Gabby, if you had a thought.
No, please go ahead.
Because we were speaking so much to almost like work-life balance and putting the work into yourself in order so you can serve others, what are some of your favorite self-care activities?
Ooh.
I've never talked to you about your own like practice you have for coping.
I think, just even starting with how I get up.
Oh,
right?
Morning routine. Walk us through the step by step.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Let's do it. Like minute by minute. Tell me.
I can't even fathom a point in my life where it was just like getting up and just like hitting the pavement. It's just having quiet.
My worst nightmare.
Yeah, like waking up. I mean, I always first thing I do is just meditation, right? Like throw on even, and sometimes I'm not going to like sit here and be like, oh, meditation. I'll just grab my Insight timer. I know with my like handful of teachers that I'll do like my 5 minute and truthfully, some days my head's just like whoosh, and I just do it like it's my job. And then just like getting up quiet, like journaling. I actually hit the journal. I make my little lemon water. I get my coffee going. I just journal. And then I kind of start, after I do that, I'm really mindful not to look at my phone, like right when because it's like, even with like putting on the meditation, it's like you see things like text or something, you can get it. It's like,
you already see the notification.
I feel like that almost, it just feels like, it's like, feel like doing something like super unhealthy in the beginning of the day, right?
Yeah,
like eating like ice cream for breakfast.
Feels like waking up and having a cigarette.
Absolutely. Yeah. It totally does.
Yeah.
And then always hitting some sort of exercise. So I try to sometimes even like, whether it's what's cool with like doing stuff virtually, sometimes I have like a phone session. I can hit the beach. So I'll go there early, have my phone session, go walk, go on a run after, get in the water, go surf. But just I think ocean is a huge thing for me. Being in the water, I think practices of yoga. I don't go to yoga, but I kind of I don't even know what I'm doing in my house, but it's some sort of yoga that I'm doing. Cardio yoga, perhaps.
It's like sure what I'm doing, but it's yoga to me.
Like planks with yoga and music always. But that's another thing. Music always, all day long. Whether it is so. That's been a huge thing for me in my life. Is like where does that can sound? But I mean, from the moment I get up, whether it's just like sounds of nature while I'm like journaling to like just my vibe on during the day, that's been a source of healing for sure.
That's literally why I tell people that I refuse to go to karaoke, because music impacts my emotional state so much that if someone is watching songs, it actually sends chills down my spine.
I hate
karaoke. I cannot listen to music that I don't like or is not in the like mood or realm or energy that I want to be giving out, because it helps me foster it so much.
Yeah.
Wow. You really validated my morning routine, because I was right there with you to the exercise. And then I was like,
gosh. Well, that's been
I'm walking my dog.
That's probably the biggest. I mean, for me, I literally kind of feel like a pit bull personality. Like if I don't get that out, I think that's always how I dealt from a young age. That's always how I dealt with hard emotions.
Ooh.
And so it's just I went into, athletics after college and stuff like that. So I think it's always been this way that I personally know how to center and balance. If I get injured or if someone tied me up in a chair for 40, I don't even know. Right. So that's a huge way. That's a huge way that I regulate, I guess you can say.
Wow.
Which is so cool, because when you find that, it's like when you find that and you can stick with it, it's beautiful. Yeah. That's what works. My relationship with exercise is so touch and go.
Yeah. Same.
But my mind-body connection's real. I just do it in different ways. I've been getting really into Have you ever done Reiki,
I have,
Kim?
yeah.
How do you like it?
I think it's cool. I mean, all of this stuff, like whether it's therapy, Reiki, it's so dependent on the person that you're going to.
Oh, it so is.
It's unbelievable.
World of difference. It could be a whole different country, like depending on if you go to this person or this person. Yeah. So who I went to was really amazing. It was super cool. It's kind of like she pointed to things that I was like, how
that's what's so cool with these healers that focus on your body, is because like you said, like the book Body Keeps the Score, like it can't lie. Like today, this morning, she asked me a question after like feeling my pulse and like certain pressure points. And she asked me like a very pointed question, and like I kind of went around it, and she was like, interesting, because your body's telling me this, and blah, blah, blah. And that sort of led us down this conversation of actually getting to the point of what I actually was feeling. And I just didn't really feel like talking about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, your body like really, grips onto things.
Well, it's like nervous, right? Like, so you don't want to be nervous sometimes, but you can't freaking help it. You just, and sometimes people are like shaking and they're stuttering, and it's like, oh, that's all physical. It's nuts if you like really think about what your body literally does to your emotionality.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think a really gorgeous place to end on would be if someone has gone to a horrific therapist. Rather than writing off therapy entirely, what would you say to someone that has had a negative experience, is looking for someone new, and is like trying to figure out what that looks like for them?
Oof, that's it kind of, I would first point to how it's like a job can be so different depending on where you work, right? It's the same with,
or who your coworkers
it's just
are.
like going to dinner with your best friend versus going to dinner with someone that you don't click at all with, right? It's just, it's like, you know, when it comes down to it, it's interesting because even kind of, Gabby, you spoke to it earlier. It's like, wow, we never like hear about a therapist, like, you know, like, I think that it's how you really do. And this is, again, the way just I see it, but it's energy, right? It's my energy with you guys, and it's you guys feeling off my energy. And you're going to have that exchange with whoever you're in front of, whether it's your doctor or your therapist or your friend or whoever. And I think when you're looking, I think too many people are like, oh, well, they're a therapist. Like, cool, got one.
Yeah.
But I would just really point people toward paying attention to how they feel around, especially if you're seeking therapy, because sometimes there's just some people where you feel like you could just like open up to more, and they're more welcoming, and it's easier to like say certain things around them than even other therapists. And I think I would really encourage you to find someone where that just, it might not be easy, right? Because it's hard to just do that generally, but I think that there's people that can make it not as painful, for sure. And that's just,
a little bit.
and I think you should, I think I have a whole like blog on this where I'm like, how to find the right therapist, right? And it's just choose them, right? It's almost like if you're looking for a job, like don't get so caught up in the job, like wanting you for the job. Like, do you want the job? And don't be afraid to ask questions. What's your philosophy? Like, do a little research before. What are you looking for? Are you looking for someone who like needs to manage your meds, and you want them to really be on board with your psychiatrist? Or are you looking for someone that's going mind, body, soul stuff, like talking about crystals and manifestation? Like, make sure that you know, I think it could help for you to be really clear on what you're looking for, so you can ask the questions that are important to you. And I'll do that sometimes during my consult calls. You know, I'll ask people. Some people are like, I don't have any questions, and it's like, are you sure? Like, because I'll tell you a little bit about this and this, because I think you know, it's like, that's, you know, that could be really beneficial for you. So then I kind of start asking, like, well, what are you looking for? Like, what are you coming in for? Because also too, if they're a good fit, you know, for me, and it sounds like, meaning like, I feel like it's a person that's, you know, in the niche of like who I would work well with. Like, I have to be honest with myself of like, when someone doesn't feel like a good fit, and direct them to someone who would. Like, all of that is a part of it. It's on me too, as a therapist, to make sure I feel like I could help this person that's coming to me. Even if they don't really know what they're looking for, it's on me to like make sure they're getting what they need from the right person. I feel like I like went real long with that answer.
That was very helpful.
Are you kidding? No, that was seriously beautiful. And I also think that's so cool. I mean, we've already been talking for so long, I don't want to take up your whole day, but I love how you and I have spoken about how like your requirements for people that you serve, and like who's best that you're going to serve. And if that's not aligned, referring them out. Imagine the therapists that don't, that it's like the job where it's like, oh, I'm just happy to have a new client. Like, whether I'm best to serve them or not is irrelevant. They're my client now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's what's tricky, right? Because you don't want like anyone to feel, it's like, you don't want anyone to feel like you don't fit what I'm looking for. Right. But I think that it's more of, based on what you're clinically coming into me for, I feel like there's better fits.
Can I serve you best, or can someone else?
And I'll say that. And I think that's been like through the years of learning the language, how to deliver that in a way where like someone really hears you. It's not personal to them. Can't be personal. You don't even know them yet and any of their stuff. But it's just sometimes, and I guess, and I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to go for it. But it's like a lot of, at this point, it's like an intuitive push that I'm doing in my job, which is really like a cool thing. It's just kind of like, this, just by how the conversation's going and the flow that's going on already, like I feel like they might be a better fit for somebody, or they've said some things that like I don't know if that's my lane. And you know what? I'm not going to hesitate. I'm just going to send them to someone who I know it's their lane.
Yeah.
And so it's just, that's all a part of it too. It's not being at a point where like, God, I need clients. I'll take whoever. It's like, no, like I'm not there. I'm not, I rather that person they need to go where they're going to get the best treatment.
Gabby, do you see how any lesson I've ever told on this podcast and acted like it was my own was from her? Yeah. All my intellect and abilities have been taken from him.
No, this was
not even.
I feel like I've cracked into Meadow's brain a little bit deeper. It's been such a cool experience.
It's great.
Kim, not to put you on the spot, we can absolutely cut this out, but I think it would be so cool if you're open to it. We should absolutely do like a Q&A with our listeners sometime. Like have you come back
love that.
And do a community. Because I can imagine our listeners listening to this and being like, holy shit, I've never heard this perspective from a therapist like this before. So I think it would be huge.
Do you know what we should do?
On Patreon only?
Patreon newsletter.
Yes.
Yeah. Whatever. I love that kind of stuff.
Type of thing.
I actually feel like that's where I almost do best. Like I do good with like catching the balls. Like, give it to me. Come on, questions. What is it?
Let's do that. Okay.
It's fun.
You heard it here first, team.
Oh, I'm so excited. Super fun. If you made it this far, you better join Patreon because Kim's going to answer your exact questions on there.
Yeah, that'd be super fun.
Kim, thank you so much.
Kim,
thanks you guys. It's always fun chatting about all
and you're going to have to come back. I was like, we basically just got like our baseline level of what we need to talk about with this first hour. You got to come back so we can over-intellectualize.
Go deeper and deeper and deeper. You guys have like a specific topic, whatever you need. I think it's super fun for me. And I mean, you guys are lovely and let's do it.
Thanks, Kim.
You're welcome, girls.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the Thoughts Mayberry podcast every Monday.